Stephen Curry has been traded to the Miami Heat. Let that sink in for a second. The greatest shooter in the history of basketball, the man who spent his entire career transforming the Golden State Warriors into a dynasty, is now headed to South Beach to join Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bam Adebayo. A legendary career just entered its most unexpected chapter, and the team Curry is joining was already one of the most complete rosters in the Eastern Conference before this trade happened. What this combination unlocks offensively, defensively, and in terms of pure championship potential is going to take time to fully unpack. And there is another development quietly building behind the scenes that nobody is fully discussing yet. One that could push this Miami roster into territory the NBA has not seen in years. The blockbuster move itself sent shockwaves through the league in a way that even the most seasoned observers were not prepared for. Stephen Curry, the two-time MVP, the four-time NBA champion, the man who redefined what a point guard could be, is now wearing Miami Heat colors. The trade represents one of the most seismic roster moves in recent memory, not just because of the talent involved, but because of what Curry symbolizes. He is not a player who has bounced around the league. He is not a guy with a complicated history of demanding his way out of situations. Curry spent his entire professional career building something legendary in the Bay Area, and the fact that he is now putting on a different uniform for the first time is a story in itself. But more important than the storyline is the reality of what Curry actually brings to Miami after accumulating one of the most decorated individual resumes in basketball history. Think about what Stephen Curry does on the basketball floor. He moves without the ball better than almost anyone who has ever played the game. He gets to his spots at a pace that makes elite defenders look completely lost. His footwork coming off screens is the kind of thing coaches show players in film sessions as the gold standard for how the action is supposed to be done. His shooting range is genuinely limitless. There are nights where Curry has stepped into threes from distances that most players would not dream of attempting at warm-ups, and he makes them look routine. His basketball IQ allows him to read defenses before they even set, constantly firing in the cracks in coverage before opponents realize there's a crack to fire. He is a champion who has performed on the biggest stages in the sport and delivered. And now, all of that is coming to South Beach. Miami did not just add a name, they added a player who can single-handedly change the mathematical equation of a basketball game simply by standing in the corner. The reason Miami went so aggressively after Stephen Curry traces back directly to the move the organization made when they brought Giannis Antetokounmpo to South Beach. Once the Heat man had one of the two or three most physically dominant players in the modern era, the front office understood they were operating in championship or bust territory. Pat Riley and the organization did not spend the resources required to acquire Giannis just to be a second-round playoff team. They are trying to win a title, and to win a title in today's NBA, you need more than one player who can take over a game. Giannis is an unstoppable interior force, but elite defenses in the playoffs have historically drawn multiple bodies at him, loaded the paint, and dared opponents to beat them from the perimeter. The Heat needed a player who made that defensive strategy completely unplayable. They needed someone who could stand beyond the arc and demand individual defensive attention from the moment he caught the ball. They needed a floor spacer who carried the same gravity Giannis does, forcing defenses into impossible decisions. They needed Stephen Curry alongside Bam Adebayo, who has quietly become one of the most complete two-way players in the Eastern Conference. The front office saw a big three that made logical sense on every level. Curry provides elite spacing and perimeter scoring. Giannis provides dominant interior attacks and elite athleticism. Bam provides defensive versatility, passing, screening, and the kind of connective tissue that keeps a roster with multiple stars from developing friction. The organization viewed this as a configuration that checked every box a championship team needs to check, and they were willing to give up significant assets to make it happen. That level of organizational commitment tells you everything about how seriously Miami is taking their current championship window. Now, let us actually break down why Curry, Giannis, and Bam together form one of the most genuinely difficult offensive puzzles any defenses in the NBA will be asked to solve. Start with the basic defensive mathematics. When Curry is on the floor, any team playing against Miami has to make a fundamental choice on every single possession. You either dedicate a quality individual defender to chase Curry across the entire floor at all times, or you switch and create matchup nightmares by putting slower players on them, or you try to zone and risk leaving shooters open in the corners. None of those options are clean. All of them come with trade-offs. And the reason those trade-offs are so devastating now is because of who else is on the floor with Curry. When a defense commits resources to chasing Curry around screens and monitoring his movement off the ball, the lane opens up for Giannis in ways that should genuinely terrify opposing coaches. Giannis Antetokounmpo in open space, with a clear path to the rim, is one of the most difficult propositions in basketball to stop. He is 6 feet 11 inches tall, and he runs at a pace that belongs in a track meet. He finishes through contact with the kind of force that routinely sends multiple defenders stumbling backward. When Curry is occupying defensive attention on the perimeter, the floor opens and Giannis becomes a runaway locomotive with nowhere near enough bodies to stop him. And then it works in the opposite direction just as efficiently. When defenses collapse into the paint to account for Giannis, Curry materializes in space somewhere beyond the arc, and he does not need more than a fraction of a second to get a shot up. He is a 2-time MVP, who has broken the all-time three-point record in the NBA. Open looks for Stephen Curry are dangerous looks for the team trying to defend him. Bam Adebayo's role in this offensive system deserves its own extended examination, because his value goes far beyond what shows up in a basic box score. Bam is the connector. He is the player who makes the actions between Curry and Giannis flow. His ability to set precise screens for Curry coming off picks creates the kinds of separation that lead directly to open threes or drives to the rim. His passing out of the short roll is the kind of skill that allows the pick and roll to become a true three-option possession rather than a two-man game. Bam can catch the ball at the elbow and immediately read whether to hit Curry cutting baseline, thread a pass to Giannis rolling to the rim, or attack a closeout himself with his own scoring ability. Defenses have to account for all three possibilities simultaneously, and the talent level across all three options is elite enough that there's no acceptable answer. Add in Bam's finishing ability inside, and his willingness to make the extra pass rather than force his own shot, and you have a player who multiplies the effectiveness of every star around him. Erik Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the NBA, and the system he will construct around his trio would be a masterclass in modern offensive design. Curry's off-ball movement has always been his deadliest weapon, and Spoelstra's offense will put that movement on constant display. Think about the possibilities. Dribble handoffs between Curry and Bam at the top of the key force the defense into coverage decisions that create open threes, or driving lanes every single time. Stagger screens where Curry comes off 2 or 3 consecutive picks before receiving the ball. Give him enough separation to pull up from virtually anywhere on the floor. Transition opportunities led by Giannis running the break at full speed with Curry trailing would punish any team that does not sprint back in transition defense. Weak side movement from Curry while Giannis is being double-teamed in the post creates the exact looks that result in wide-open threes from one of the greatest shooters ever to play. Over 7 playoff games, no defensive staff in the league has a clean answer for all of it. You can adjust, you can scheme. The defensive side of this team is where things get even more interesting, because the assumption that this is purely an offensive super team would be a significant mistake. Giannis Antetokounmpo was not merely a great offensive player who happens to play defense. He is an elite defender in his own right, a player capable of guarding multiple positions, protecting the rim, and disrupting opposing offenses with his length, athleticism, and motor. His help defense is suffocating. His ability to recover and contest shots at the rim after starting his rotation from the perimeter is genuinely remarkable for a player his size. Bam Adebayo is arguably the most versatile defender in the Eastern Conference, a player who can incredibly guard every position on the floor without the defense losing structure. He guards guards on the perimeter, he guards centers in the post, and he makes the right rotations before his teammates even call for help. Miami's defensive culture under Spoelstra has been one of the defining characteristics of this franchise for nearly 2 decades. Curry's defensive limitations are real, but the system Spoelstra runs has consistently hidden defensive weaknesses by keeping the overall structure sound and having elite defenders like Giannis and Bam available to cover for teammates when needed. This team could legitimately be a league on both ends of the floor, and that combination is what separates good teams from championship teams. Now, here is the part of the story that has not been fully told yet, and it changes the entire scope of what Miami is building. The Heat did not go after Stephen Curry in isolation. From the very beginning, the vision Pat Riley and the front office were chasing involved both Curry and Klay Thompson. The pursuit was aggressive from the start. One of the boldest simultaneous chases of 2 franchise cornerstones the league has seen in years. Miami has never been afraid to go after the biggest names available, but targeting the Splash Brothers together takes that reputation to a completely different level. Klay Thompson, Curry's co-pilot on 4 championship teams, one of the greatest shooters the sport has ever produced, is the other piece of this plan. The conversations are active, the interest is serious, and if it comes together, what Miami is assembling will be unlike anything the NBA has seen in a very long time. Think about what Klay Thompson means to this offense. Here is a player who spent more than a decade alongside Steph and Curry building one of the most celebrated backcourt partnerships in basketball history. Their chemistry is not something that gets developed through months of practice or preseason games. It was built over thousands of hours of shared experience, countless playoff battles, championship runs, and a profound understanding of how each other moves, thinks, and operates on a basketball floor. Klay Thompson coming off screens is one of the most efficient offensive actions in basketball history. His ability to catch and fire without a dribble, to shoot off movement, to find space in a crowded half court, and convert high-difficulty shots at an elite percentage has been one of the defining characteristics of his career. He averaged over 20 points per game in 3 of Golden State's championship runs, and put together some of the most iconic individual playoff performances in recent memory, including an 11-point fourth quarter in the 2016 Finals and a first-half performance in 2016, where he set a Finals record with 6 three-pointers before halftime. The reason Miami views Klay as the perfect perimeter addition goes beyond the obvious shooting ability. The Heat front office sees a player who has championship experience, who understands the discipline required to win at the highest level, who does not need the ball in his hands to be effective, and who fits seamlessly alongside stars without needing the offense to be built around him. Klay Thompson next to Stephen Curry means defenses will be forced to dedicate significant defensive resources to 2 of the greatest shooters in NBA history simultaneously, while also trying to contain Giannis inside and account for Bam's playmaking ability. The defensive math becomes completely unsolvable. You simply cannot guard all of those options at the same time. No scheme eliminates all of the threats, and the more defense focuses on any single player, the more everyone else thrives. Imagine what a Curry and Klay reunion in Miami would look like in a playoff series. The same off-ball actions that made Golden State nearly undefendable for a decade will be operational again. This time with Giannis as the most dominant interior weapon either of them has ever shared the court with. Think about the Warriors dynasty at their peak. Think about how defenses struggled to contain 2 elite shooters moving simultaneously, while Draymond Green orchestrated the offense and kept the defense sound. Now replace Draymond with Bam Adebayo and add Giannis Antetokounmpo to the mix. The baseline comparison point is a dynasty that won 4 championships in 8 years, and this version has more interior dominance than any team from that era. The chemistry between Curry and Klay would not need to be rebuilt from scratch. It already exists. It is already wired in, and the rest of the roster around them might be the best supporting cast either of them has ever played with. Before moving forward, it is worth taking a moment to fully appreciate what Stephen Curry built in Golden State, because the magnitude of what he is leaving behind is part of what makes this move so historic. Curry arrived in the Bay Area as a first-round pick with bad ankles and a reputation that suggested his body might prevent him from reaching his ceiling. What followed was one of the most remarkable individual careers in the history of professional basketball. He won back-to-back MVP awards, including one unanimous selection that remains the most dominant MVP victory in NBA history. He won 4 championships. He broke the all-time three-point record in the regular season and kept extending it further each year. He turned the Golden State Warriors into a cultural phenomenon that transcended basketball, filling arenas across the country with fans who wanted to see what was happening on that floor in real time. He changed the way coaches build offenses, the way players practice their shooting, and the way the sport itself is evaluated. Point guards, who would have been considered role players in earlier eras, suddenly had a template for what was possible if their shooting was elite enough. Every conversation about range, shot selection, and perimeter of gravity in the modern NBA traces back to something Stephen Curry did first. Leaving that franchise, leaving that city, leaving that chapter of his career is a significant emotional story in its own right. But Curry is clearly choosing to chase another championship, and the path he has chosen runs directly through South Beach. For Giannis Antetokounmpo, Curry's arrival represents something he has not had consistently throughout his career in Milwaukee or his early time in Miami. A legitimate perimeter shooter who warps defensive geometry simply by existing on the floor. Giannis has always been a player capable of doing extraordinary things. But elite playoff defenses have historically been willing to load the paint and dare him to beat them with his jumper. Those defensive strategies become genuinely dangerous when your perimeter players are capable of punishing. With Curry on the floor, any defense that collapses on Giannis is immediately handing the basketball to one of the greatest shooters in history with time and space to operate. The defensive double team, that used to be a legitimate tactical option against Giannis' center defenses, is now a coverage call that directly produces open threes for a guy who has made over 3,500 of them in his career. Giannis, with proper floor spacing around him, is a completely different offensive weapon than Giannis playing alongside players. And the relationship works in the other direction as well. Curry has always operated most efficiently when his gravity and movement created advantages for teammates, and when the spacing allowed him to operate freely rather than being tracked by physical defenders in the collapsed half-court. Giannis attacks the rim in ways that make spacing the floor around him an absolute necessity, and smart defenses that try to overload the paint to stop Giannis create exactly the clean catch-and-shoot opportunities where Curry is most dangerous. They make each other better in ways that are not accidental. The fit is built into how each player's game naturally operates. Bam Adebayo quietly becomes more important in this configuration, and not less. His willingness to subordinate personal statistics in service of the team's success has defined his career and made him one of the most respected players in the locker room throughout his time in Miami. He is not going to need the ball in his hands 20 times per game. He is going to set the screens that get Curry open. He is going to make the passes out of the short roll that generate the threes. He is going to anchor the defense when Giannis is helping on the backside. He is going to outwork opposing big men for rebounds and outlet passes that fuel transition opportunities for Curry and Giannis in the open floor. That kind of unselfishness is rarer than people acknowledge, and it is the quality that allows rosters built around multiple stars to function without the internal friction that has undermined other superteams. In a lineup with this much offensive firepower, Bam's value as a connective tissue that holds the entire structure together is immeasurable. He is the reason the whole system works, And he is the reason it will keep working when the playoff pressure rises. Miami's championship expectations changed the moment the Giannis trade happened, but Curry's arrival elevates those expectations to an entirely different conversation. The Heat are not merely a contender now, they are one of the favorites. If you sit down and compare this roster to the greatest super teams the modern era has produced, the conversation holds up. The combination of elite shooting, dominant interior play, defensive versatility, experienced coaching, championship pedigree, and basketball intelligence across the starting lineup gives this team the profile of a genuine title threat. Coaches around the league are already mapping out how to guard this offense in a playoff series, and the consistent conclusion they are reaching is that there is no clean answer. You can choose who you are willing to give open looks to, but someone on this roster is always going to make you pay for that choice. Every contender in the league is now recalibrating around the reality of what Miami has assembled. Coaches in both conferences are already working through defensive schemes that account for Curry's movement, Giannis' interior dominance, and Bam's playmaking, and none of those schemes have a clean answer. The presence of this roster on the schedule changes the strategic calculus for every front office trying to win a championship, and that impact extends well beyond the court. For the Golden State Warriors, Curry's departure represents the end of an era in a way that very few sports moments genuinely do. And it is worth understanding just how difficult this move was for Golden State to accept, because trading Steph and Curry is not a decision any franchise makes willingly. He is the greatest player in Warriors history. He is the reason the dynasty existed in the first place. When Miami's pursuit began, the instinct inside Golden State's front office was to shut the conversation down entirely. The idea of Curry leaving the Bay felt almost impossible to seriously entertain, but Miami was not making a casual inquiry. Pat Riley and the Heat front office came after both Curry and Klay Thompson with the kind of aggressive, relentless focus that made it impossible for Golden State to simply ignore. The package eventually assembled had to be significant enough to justify the unthinkable. And even then, the Warriors did not make this decision easily. His exit closes one of the greatest chapters in franchise history, with a finality the organization and its fan base are going to carry for years. He is the reason the franchise's culture, identity, and market value became what they are. He is woven into the fabric of that organization in a way that no trade package can fully replace. The Warriors enter a new phase of their history now, and it is a phase defined entirely by what comes after Steph and Curry. Miami's long-term outlook is genuinely compelling. Curry is in his late 30s, but his game was never built on explosive athleticism. His footwork, shooting mechanics, and basketball IQ are skills that age gracefully, and he has maintained his body better than almost any player at his stage. Giannis is 29 years old and entering the peak years of his prime. Bam Adebayo is 27 and still improving. The age profile on this roster suggests a championship window that extends over multiple seasons, and that kind of sustained contention is exactly what Miami has been trying to build. Every thread in this story comes back to the same central truth. Stephen Curry joining the Miami Heat is one of the biggest roster moves in recent NBA history, and it is a move that makes fundamental basketball sense on every level you choose to examine it. Offensively, this is arguably the most difficult team to guard that Miami has ever assembled. Defensively, the combination of Giannis and Bam provides a foundation that most super teams do not have. The coaching staff has the credibility and the system to maximize what this group can do. And the championship experience distributed across this roster is the kind of ingredient that consistently separates teams that make deep playoff runs from teams that fall short at the biggest moments. The possibility of Klay Thompson joining this team adds a dimension that even the most optimistic projections for this roster did not anticipate. The Splash Brothers separated, then the Splash Brothers finding each other again, this time on a Miami Heat alongside one of the most dominant players on the planet, is a storyline that writes itself. The history together, The championships, the records, the backcourt chemistry that took years to develop and made Golden State virtually unguardable for the better part of a decade. None of that goes away. It transfers directly onto whatever floor they are sharing. Stephen Curry's arrival in Miami is not just a blockbuster trade. It is the beginning of a completely new era for the Miami Heat franchise. Everything that made the Golden State Warriors a dynasty is now walking into a situation built around one of the most physically dominant players the sport has ever produced, surrounded by a coaching staff capable of unlocking everything this roster can do, in a city and an organization with its own championship culture and its own deep understanding of what it takes to win at the highest level. With Giannis Antetokounmpo inside, Bam Adebayo connecting every piece, and the very real possibility of Klay Thompson bringing the Splash Brothers back together under the South Beach sun, the basketball world is watching this Heat roster with a kind of attention that only comes around when something historic is genuinely taking shape. This could be the beginning of something none of us have ever seen before, and the league is going to spend the next several years trying to figure out how to stop it.